My wife might have cheated with her friend's ex-boyfriend. This is an updated story. Click the link in description to watch the first part. Want to thank everybody for their support and honestly helping me. People here has been guiding me through this and it's been helpful. I was going to post this weekend but so much has happened that I had to post this update today. This is definitely a crazy time for me, and it's blowing me away right now how right you are about my wife. At the beginning of this year when my wife ran into her friend, Tasha, ex-boyfriend at the supermarket. When my wife introduced me to this guy, Trey, I didn't think it was a big deal. At first it seemed like she had reunited with an old friend or whatever, but she seemed a little too excited to see him again. After that they kept in touch and it was beginning to be too much. She started showing all the red flags and it was looking real suspicious. They'd talk on the phone for hours, they would like each other pics on Facebook. And this guy started calling late at night. When I told her all this looked inappropriate, she said I was overreacting. When she spoke with him, she would laugh and giggle, and she would try to teach him Spanish words since we're Puerto Rican. What was worst was at the Super Bowl party Trey had invited us to. At the party I caught him checking out my wife, especially her ass. She had the type of ass where if she walked past, you would wait a few seconds then turn and look at it. Eventually she became aware of this even caught him and didn't do or say anything about it. When I told her he was checking her out, she dismissed that too. It got to the point where I had to try and find her last week because she wasn't where she claimed she was. She was supposed to go over her best friend, Mandy, house to Mandy's mom's nails but flaked on her after Trey called her. Since my wife's phone went straight to voicemail I assumed she was with Trey and I had to call my best friend, Marcus, and he let me borrow his car to find her. Driving down Trey's street, found them and it bothered me that he practically had no clothes on. He had on just a white beater, some shorts and it looked like flip-flops. Driving back to Marcus' house, he asked me what I saw. I told him and even he admitted to he thinks he fucked her. I told him I think so too, especially since he had no clothes on. If I was dressed that way and somebody came over, my wife would tell me to put some clothes on. He looked like he just woke up or something. He asked me what I planned on doing. But I didn't really know at the time. After that, I had thanked Marcus for babysitting my kids and surprisingly made it home almost 40 minutes before my wife did. When she came back she even looked guilty. When I asked where she was super vague and wouldn't answer me in a direct way. Eventually I just had to drop it, especially since I didn't catch them in the act like I planned to. People here said it was going to get worse. And it did. Now she looks at me like I'm her prison guard and don't really want to talk to me. She only talk to her friends on her phone and don't interact with the kids and treat them like they're a chore. She just sits in our little dining room area and text. I didn't even know what to say to her. What was even worse was thanks to my schedule, I couldn't really stop her from cheating. My wife knew my everyday routine and I'm sure Trey did too. Between my job, taking care of our kids, and obligations to my mom, they apparently met up while I was out. I know this because while I was out, I would try to call her. And she never answered. My wife's schedule was more flexible than mine, especially since my wife was her own boss thanks to her nail salon. Whenever I got back home my wife wouldn't be there, especially if she didn't have to pick up the kids from school. And when she came back she'd be vague about where she was. This really messed with my mind and gave me what I think is anxiety. I would be with my mom. And I would be thinking of my wife riding some guy's meat. And this was ever since she left Trey's house that night. If it wasn't for this community, I wouldn't have been a lot worse. If I was blindsided by this, I don't know what my mindset would have been. But after I was told to calm down and start monitoring them for truth, I had to man up. After doing just that, I was able to get the truth and found out today that yes, Trey was fucking my wife. And my plan, it worked out perfectly. That weekend after work, I bought a VAR and put it in her car. At first I tested it out when I took the kids to eat McDonald's. And it works pretty good. After that I put it in my wife's car. Since it's possible he banged her in the car, it should pick it up. It should even pick up any talk or incriminating conversations they could be having. Doing this I did feel crazy and couldn't believe this was my life. The most important advice I think I got was to act like I wasn't concerned about Trey. It was a lie, but I think I need to start getting used to it. Not bringing him up and acting like everything was good got her to ease up a little. It was hard, but I just kept my mind on getting the truth. When I told Marcus about this, even he thought I was a genius. A few days ago I snuck out and got the VAR out of her car and listened to what was on it. I heard a few things. But I definitely heard her talking with Trey in her car. The one thing that stood out was when they were riding somewhere. The music was on, but it could still kinda make out what they were saying. He was definitely flirting with my wife and calling her sexy. My wife was giggling and I couldn't make out what she was saying. But it wasn't stopping him. I heard him tell her to stop somewhere and things got silent for a minute. Then it sounded like a bunch of guys got in the car and they drove off. It got harder to hear them with everybody holding their own conversations. It sounded like she was driving them around to places. Through all their nonsense I heard him say he was trying to come over. For a second I couldn't hear the conversation. But I definitely heard my wife say to Trey, she has to leave early so come over. That was pretty much the end of the usefulness coming from the VAR in her car. They just talked and laughed and one guy called Trey, thirsty. After that I tried to figure out who was my wife talking about when she said somebody was leaving early. I thought it might be Mandy. But even though Mandy was like a sister to her, it don't seem like she told Mandy about Trey. She definitely wasn't talking about her mom, so it had to be the girl who run the salon with my wife. It didn't make too much sense to me because there was a teenager learning to do nails there, but it was the best thing to go on. Nobody else made sense. I called up my friend Marcus to see if we could swap cars for the day. And he said yeah. After telling him what I heard, he was shocked, called her a high-price hoe, and said he hoped I catch her this time. Already knowing how I move, she knew to leave after me and my mom's next-door neighbors helped her with her yard. Since I couldn't cancel on my mom, I told I'd only stay for a little while because I was tired from work. My mom blew down on me for leaving early, but then her next-door neighbor said he could handle it. Around 9, I pulled up to my wife's shop when it was closing. It's located in a strip mall, so it was possible to hide with the other cars there, especially since it was Marcus' car. I drove. Inside, Trey was definitely there. And I was pissed to know I was right. Nobody was left inside except my wife Trey, and let's call her Sherry. My wife was definitely dressed to impress and Trey was all over her. I saw Trey was behind my wife with his arms wrapped around her while they were talking. After about 20 minutes they really started to get into it and Trey was kissing on my wife's neck and grabbing her on her behind. After trapping her against the wall, it was clear it was kissing and Sherry just watched them. After about 5 minutes Sherry must have said something about leaving and they smiled and waved her off. Taking Trey's hand they walked off to the back where it looked like they were going down into the basement area. I've been down in the basement area when she first started up the salon, so I knew that was the only thing in the back. She was looking for a bigger place to run her shop so she could have an office space, since the place she's at now wasn't really high-end looking enough for her. If she doesn't know anything, she knows how to market something. I was so pissed off I can't lie. I really can't believe this woman would do this to me. I did so much for her. And she would do this to me. And Trey was definitely a real snake. He never gave me good vibes about him. And I now see why. After I grabbed my VAR, I made my way over to the salon. Sherry had just got done grabbing her things, so I waited for her to come out before I made my presence known. When I called out to her, she looked like she saw a ghost in front of her. I told her not lock the doors, and that I know everything. She claimed she didn't know what I was talking about. And I said I watched them the whole time. I called her a fat, lying bitch. And we got into a huge argument. She said don't blame her that my wife was fucking another man. And I called her messy and to get out of my way. She said I wasn't going to be able to catch them fucking because the door was locked. I had asked her why would they lock the door if Sherry knew they were fucking already. And she said they didn't want anybody coming down. Making my way in, pulled out my phone and called my wife. Apparently Sherry decided to follow me in while I had made my way to the back. My wife didn't answer my call. So I surprised her by banging on the basement door since it actually was locked. I didn't know what was going on down there. But I knew if she didn't come up we were over. After banging on the door 3 times telling them to come up, they still didn't come from the basement. Turning back to Sherry, I asked her how long she knew about this. Sherry swore she knew about Trey for about a month, and that my wife started cheating with him recently. She said he came in on her break and after a while they had went down in the basement. She said the next day they would talk about what happened. I asked her, did she know? That was Tasha's ex-boyfriend. And she said my wife told her. I told Sherry we had kids. And she said she don't have anything to do with that. I said that's fine, and that I'll be using what she said in court. When Sherry asked me what I was talking about, I showed her the VAR and told her she can go home now. Getting back in the car, I drove back to Marcus, who was a big help with not just the car, but watching kid too. I told him what I saw. And he and his girlfriend consoled me. After that, while me and Marcus was talking, Mandy had called my phone. This was the last thing I needed, but I should have expected it. I decided to pick up. And she said my wife told her everything and that my wife wanted to talk to me tomorrow. I told her to put her on the phone now, but Mandy said she won't let me talk to her now. And she knew I was going to blow up on her. I told her I wanted to speak to my wife. But Mandy wouldn't put her on. Mandy said if I came over she'd call the police and wait until tomorrow. She said she was going to make my wife call me and they both wanted me to calm down. I said, yeah, whatever. And just hung up. After coming back home with the kids I got super emotional. Not only that, my anxiety started kicking in again. I still can't believe this is happening to me. Even after I did everything right with this woman, somehow I did it wrong. I thought after being married for this long, I was sure I didn't have to worry about this happening. The worst is that this wasn't a one-time thing, he was fucking her consistently. Now my whole world is going to have to change because whatever reason. I can't wait to see what she has to say tomorrow. I will update when I hear what she has to say. The ball is in her court, and if I don't like way I hear I'm getting us a divorce. My mind is racing and I think it may have been a bad idea to leave Marcus' house. I feel alone, but I had to post here since everybody wanted to know exactly what my wife was doing.